Before we begin, I live in a noisy home with 3 cats, 2 dogs, and 1 lizard, and 2 other human beings, so there might be some background noises. Just bear with it. One of the cats in question that I just mentioned. Did she just fuck out? No, she's right behind me. There she is. She's the noisy one. I don't even know. Why am I reviewing this book? Why am I even trying to review this book? It's so fucking complicated without going into fucking spoilers. Ah! And I do all this without writing a fucking script. I need to script for this because otherwise I'm gonna start spoiling shit. Hello, welcome to another video. Today's video is going to be a series review, which I think is actually a little bit difficult to do because, you know, you don't want to spoil things and it's an entire series, but basically what I'm gonna do is just kind of talk about it as a whole and potentially, you know, hype it up for people to want to read if they haven't already, because the series that I'm talking about today is one that has been out for quite a while, so I feel like it's not an unknown one at all. In fact, I think it's quite popular, and that is the Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. The first book is the 5th season. So a little bit about the trilogy before going into the story and all that. The first book was published in 2015, and then the series ended in 2017. There are only 3 books in the series. They're not very lengthy. None of them are above 500 pages. And yeah, they're a fantasy primarily, although I would argue a little bit sci-fi just because of some of the themes that seem to come up throughout the series. So yeah, that's it. It's you know, pretty common, a fantasy trilogy. And it is by N.K. Jemisin, who before writing this trilogy, she wrote a lot of other things, so I'm sure you've heard of it, and if you haven't, then here you go. So, a little bit about this story and what goes on throughout the whole trilogy without spoiling anything. So I've seen a few people talk about how this book series made them think that it was a lot about motherhood. Now, you do follow a character who is a mother, but I personally do not think that these books are about motherhood. What I think these books are mostly about is the struggles of survival and the consequences of reaching for power. Which, you know, those are pretty common themes in fantasy sometimes, but I think that these books did a particularly interesting job because it's simple. It's a simple story that has been done before, and yet the way that the elements, the details of this story and how it makes it unique is incredible. So really it's it's a used before type of storyline veiled in incredibly original stuff. So as I said, you follow a main character who is a mother, and right off the bat in the first book you learn that she is what is called an origin, which are these people who have powers of a sort. It seems that the powers that they have are primarily linked to the earth, like to being able to control tremors and like earthquakes and things like that, although you do learn that there's something about like freezing stuff. So it's not very clear at the beginning, and again, I'm not going to talk more about it because I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, she has those powers. Now, people who have those powers are discriminated against. Surprise, surprise. Did we see that coming? Absolutely we did. But so she has kids who have those powers too, and she taught them to suppress it. Unfortunately, there's a big oopsie that happens in this world that they live in, where there was a very big tremor, and her 3-year-old son unconsciously stopped or like responded to what happened, and unfortunately the main character's husband noticed it, and he noticed that her son is what they call an origin, and he killed the son. So you start off this story with brutal child murder. It's wonderful. So from there, she obviously wants revenge for the death of her son, and also her husband took the daughter and ran away, so she wants her daughter back. Now, it turns into a lot more than that, obviously, because whatever happened in this world is now creating what they call seasons, which, you know, I'm assuming derives from the same concept that we have of seasons, of summer, winter, fall, all that. Except that here it's a little more brutal, where the seasons are essentially like a type of apocalypse. It's an environmental apocalypse, basically, and people have to learn to survive. So there's that going on, and her quest to find her children gets derailed because of this environmental apocalypse that is happening. And also because you learn that she has a very long hidden past, and she will potentially be either the bringer of a worse apocalypse or maybe save everyone. So that's kind of what the story is mainly about. I'm gonna stop holding this book up. I don't know why I've been holding it up the whole time. So now I want to talk about what kind of characters do you meet in this story, because I know that, you know, talking about plot is all great, but a lot of people are character-driven readers, and I do think that this book had some very strong characters. Now, none of the characters are really fun, except for maybe once you get to book 2, you meet a slightly more humorous character, but the first book is definitely, there isn't a whole lot of fun going on. But you do get, I'm gonna mostly talk about tropes, I guess. So you do get the very powerful type of character who could topple worlds, but is very broken, is, you know, needs a hug from time to time. A lot, actually. He needs a hug a lot. So you meet that kind of character. You also meet the kind of character that is very young, or seems to be young, and very mysterious, and potentially not human, and you're just like, I don't know what's going on here. Is this dangerous? Is this not? Is this a friend? Is this an ally? Is it even fucking human? I don't know. So you meet that too. You also meet the mommy issues character, but just make it really devastatingly sad, because life is so horrible in this world that, yeah. So you get a plethora of various characters, mostly a lot of powerful ones. There are these ancient type of ones that are very mysterious. Honestly, I couldn't even tell you now, even after finishing the trilogy, what they are. And that kind of fits very well into what they are, is that no one really knows and no one will ever really understand. Even they don't know for sure. And the way that they communicate, very odd, where I guess they don't even really move, or they move so slow that it's like disturbing, but then all of a sudden they just appear and you're like, okay, I thought you were slow, I guess not. Yeah, and then you do have just like the regular human people too. Now they do divide each other up into what they call caste systems, or use castes. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but basically when you live in a world where survival is the key, you have to be useful, and there really was no room in here for any character to be like dumb and useless and annoying or anything like that, because you just die. If you can't be useful, you just die. So yeah, those are primarily the characters. I mean, obviously there is the mother character, but now my favorite part. This is probably what I love the most about this trilogy, and it's, what is the world like? The world in this book is, if I can find a picture, I'll show a picture. Otherwise, I'm just gonna hold this map up. So let's start off with just the map. Okay, so this is the map in the book, and the continent that they're on is called the Stillness, which literally at the beginning of the first book, it just says, isn't that ironic? Because they call it the Stillness, and yet it is never still, because it is literally in constant motion. There are earthquakes all the time. I mentioned the environmental apocalypse that tend to happen frequently, and at the backs of the books, there is appendixes. Is that how you say that? I hope it is. Where it'll basically give you like a history of the seasons that have happened. So you'll have the choking season, the acid season, the boiling season, the breathless season. And I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory. They're not fun. It's not like spring, you know? It's not like fall where you get your pumpkin spice lattes and all that. It's, yeah, it's the acid season, you know? Probably rains acid on you. So anywho's, that is kind of like the environment that they're in. I'll definitely say, like, as I was reading, it felt barren. Everything felt barren and dead, and like, how does anything survive on this land if it's constantly suffering from these seasons? Now, the whole continent will not always be taken by them. Sometimes it'll be certain areas, but, you know, it's the environment. So obviously certain things spread and different problems happen in different places. Kind of like global warming. Oh, what? No way. Or sorry, not global warming, that's not the proper term, climate change. So because of the way that the stillness suffers from environmental disasters repeatedly, obviously, it's very hard to survive. It's hard to maintain crops. It's hard to maintain livestock. It's hard to have a viable water source, etc., etc. So you learn that the people on Stillness, there doesn't seem to really be a generalized, government or anything. It's kind of seems like there's different villages and towns, and there is a city, which honestly, I don't really know how that was run, but whatever. And in these little towns and everything, they have different use cases. And so from what I understood is that you'll have like breeders who I guess focus on, maintaining a population. There are, what they call them? There's the hunters, there's gatherers, I'm assuming. There's also the they weren't called inventors, but they're like the people who they're like problem solvers basically. So yeah, they have to have a certain amount of each type of people. They also have like, I guess what I kind of interpreted as like guards type of people. Anyways, you have to be useful, but also when they have filled their quota of a specific use case of people, then they don't need any more people, and they will, they'll tell people no to fuck off, and because they don't have any more mouths that they can feed, and they have to calculate how much food they need. Point is that it seems like it's very like small, self-sufficient towns, villages, etc., trying to survive seasons, and in between seasons, when there isn't a season going on, when there isn't, for example, acid falling from the fucking sky, they prepare for the next season. So it really just, nothing in this book felt like there could ever be like a cozy moment, that there could ever be, just, oh, well, why not? Just for the sake of adventure, for the sake of freedom and fun, because no one can afford to do that. That already kind of just provides this very bleak atmosphere on this world. Now, so because the world is like that, you would think that origins, right? These people who I mentioned can suppress earth shakes and can help, like there's a scene in a book, in the first book at some point where you learn that this school, I don't think it's a school, it's more like a prison, really. It's really weird, but basically the origins are controlled by what they call guardians, and they're not liked, which seemed so weird to me, because I'm like, but these people could potentially fix your continent that is constantly suffering from environmental disasters, because their magic or whatever power seems to, fix the environment. So anyways, they are clearly not treated well. And on top of that, there's also just discrimination of what people look like. Now, from what I understood, it sounded like the superior people are like in a brownish skin tone, and then they discriminate against people who are very pale and also people who are too dark, which I didn't quite understand why, and I honestly could not wrap my head around exactly what people looked like. Even the hair, the ash blown hair, it sounded so interesting. But yeah, the whole world is very different, which is why I say that, like, yes, it's a fantasy, but it also kind of sounds like a sci-fi, because just there were a lot of elements to it that sounded like almost futuristic, like a world so far in the future where humans reached a technological advancement to the point where they started messing with the environment, and well, nature is now fighting back. So it kind of seems like a mix of sci-fi and fantasy to me. So who would I recommend this book to? Who do I think this book is good for? This series is good for? Of course, anyone who likes fantasy, but it is pretty bleak, and it's not an upper. So if you're looking for something that's gonna, make you feel good and happy, don't pick this up. It's not gonna do that for you. But if you are looking for something that is very intense and that is going to make you feel things, and also decisions are made in these books that they're pretty horrific. They're pretty horrific, and I can't mention what they are because, well, okay, book starts off with a kid being murdered, and the way the author wrote responses to tragedy felt so incredibly real. Like, I've never experienced losing a child, and yet reading what it was like for the main character, I could feel it. So it will crush your soul repeatedly. And definitely probably look up some trigger warnings for this if you're a sensitive reader, because yeah, there's clearly, you know, racism, even though it's a fantasy setting. I'm not entirely sure who was discriminating against who. The only thing that was clear was that humans don't like origins. That's mostly what I got. There's, you know, child abuse. There's obviously child murder. There's, oh gosh, it's pretty bad. Look up trigger warnings for yourself if you are very sensitive. So, but if you like that kind of stuff, if you like the kind of fantasy books that it'll push you to limits that might make you feel uncomfortable, but will also make you incredibly aware of your ability to empathize, then you will probably love this trilogy. Another thing too, if you like a challenging read, if you like a read that it's not going to hold your hand through the world. I mean, I already just said I said multiple times, I don't think I could really properly explain certain things in this book because this book did not hold my hand. I did not get a nice, clear, cut out explanation of, oh, hey, this is how everything works. And I like that. I like being in a fantasy world that it's fantasy. I'm not supposed to understand everything. It's a whole different fucking world. It's not my world. I don't understand the rules. I don't know what the politics are like. I don't know who these magical people are. And that's okay, because as long as the story is good and as long as I get at least like some context to what this means, then it'll be great. And this book did so good. So if you like books that do not hold your hand, I recommend it. Other thing too, there are two different ways that these books are written. You have third person point of view and you have second person point of view. If you do not like reading second person point of views, I do not recommend this book. It's not all the time, but there is the main character, Asun, her story is being told in second person. Now, I will say it is extremely interesting why her point of view is told in second person. If you like authors pushing boundaries with the way that stories can be written, highly recommend. Yeah, I'm gonna stop there because I feel like that is long enough, but if you have read this series, please let me know what you think of it. I can 100% see why a lot of people would not like it, but I can also see why people would love it. Probably people who are a little bit mentally disturbed like I am. So yes, if you've read it, please let me know. Let me know what you thought of it. If you want to talk spoilers, just write it in the comment, put like a giant, you know, all caps spoilers, and then press enter a few times and let's chat about it, because I got a friend of mine to start, he listens to audiobooks a lot, and I told him, I was like, oh my gosh, read the audiobooks for this or listen to the audiobooks for the Broken Earth trilogy. I don't know if they're good. Apparently they are very good, but he already finished the first book and he's like, dude, that ending, and I'm like, right? So I love chatting obviously about books, so if you have read them or if you want to and then as you're reading them you want to talk to me about it, please reach out because I love doing that. So with that, I will end this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I've maybe piqued your interest to pick up this trilogy, especially if it's a trilogy that you've kind of seen and you've been like, oh, maybe I'll try it. This might just be your sign to pick it up and read it, because I feel like I should have picked it up so much sooner. So yeah, with that, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.